Creaking at Australia 108. Let's have a listen. Good morning everyone, Florian Heise here and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. It's a nice Saturday morning here for me. I've had a really good steak and eggs for breakfast, got my stein of coffee, and I received a message from a viewer pointing this article out to me, and I thought I have to have a look at this because it's bloody good. This is about creaking in a Melbourne high-rise in Australia 108. The high-rise where it's still under construction and they've already occupied a portion of the building that I discussed in a previous video. And this is an article from The Age by Charlotte Grieve. And let's have a look at this one here before we have a listen to the actual creaking, because I live in an old house, guys. We bought a Queenslander that's between 100 and 130 years old. Now, it moves. It moves a lot. In the wind, the weather, it moves around. That's fine. You deal with it in these old houses. They're bloody cold, but they've got a certain charm to them. The wood they're built out of is like steel, but, you know, you get used to it. But the noises that we're about to hear from this modern high-rise tower are much worse. Much worse. So we'll read this article. Creaking noises louder than a vacuum cleaner that disturbed residents through the night at a South Bank high-rise were caused by incorrect building techniques, a report reveals. The Prima Pearl Tower was built by Multiplex, which is now dealing with complaints from residents about loud cracking and creaking noises in a new building. The yet-to-be-completed Australia 108 tower in South Bank. Now, let me just ask you all a question. Weren't we reminded yesterday by our good friends, the real estate agents, to still buy off the plan? Still buy off the plan from reputable developers. Now, isn't Multiplex a reputable developer, guys? Isn't it? Just shows you. I mean, the Australia 108 building, constructed by Multiplex and developed by World Class Global, is set to be the tallest building in Australia and the highest residential building in the Southern Hemisphere. 75 of the building's 101 levels have been built, with completion scheduled for 2020. How would you feel if they don't actually complete the building, if they go bust before it's finished? Can that happen? Let me know in the comments, guys, if you have an example of where that's happened. Be interesting to see. Multiplex says the noises in Australia 108 are associated with extreme winds. In extreme winds, it is natural for some noise to be experienced in any high-rise, the company said in a statement. The noise is also expected to reduce at building completion, when damper tanks will be installed at the top of the tower to reduce building movement. Okay, well, let's have a listen. We'll bring this up here. What do you all think, guys? Is that something you'd like to live in? Could you imagine sleeping with that creaking in the building? What about your kids? And particularly today, these days, with all the things in the news reported about issues with buildings, you know, with people doing it on YouTube like me, talking about all these issues with these buildings, that would scare people that don't know what's happening. And sure, that, you know, you have a nice sound from the wind when you're at a higher building like that. That's fine, but the creaking and the wires. So let's get back to the article. However, in 2015, residents of Multiplex's 72-story Prima Pearl Tower on Queensbridge Street in South Bank reported creaking noises of more than 70 decibels, a volume louder than a vacuum cleaner, prompting the construction company to commission research to better understand the issue. So there you go. The Prima Pearl Tower has 70 decibels. 70 decibels. Over a 6-month period, Multiplex enlisted steel manufacturer Studco and acoustics company PKA to investigate the source of the noise in the Prima Pearl Tower. Remember, this is 2015. Researchers cut holes into the ceilings and walls of an affected apartment and set up 24-hour recording devices, then employed audio technicians to scrutinize the data. Wouldn't you love that if that was happening in your apartment building? The report, finalized in 2017, concluded that 90% of creaking noises in the tower were the result of incorrect construction techniques. Incorrect construction techniques. So before I read further, the question is the result that the construction techniques were correctly documented but incorrectly constructed, or was the technique used incorrect? Because you'd hope that this isn't a common thing in brand new towers. 50% of the noise was caused by misplaced screws or incorrect wall-to-wall or wall-to-ceiling junctions. Okay. And 40% was from products being installed on surfaces for which they were not designed. Well, there you go. So sloppy constructioning. And the question here, the wall-to-wall or wall-to-ceiling junctions, that's something to consider. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to try something a bit different. Hang on, just one sec. So let's have a look at some of the issues that you might face just separating two spaces. Now, this isn't necessarily, and I frankly don't think it's what happened in this building, but just to give people an understanding of some of the issues that come across when you're building or constructing and designing. So what I've done here is I've got my surface, set up a camera so you can see me drawing rather than looking at my bald head bending over the screen, and try to draw. So I'm experimenting here with a new technique rather than using the mouse. So bear with me, guys. So let's say we have a underside of a concrete slab. Okay, so this is a concrete slab, and we've got unit 1 here, and we've got unit 2, and they can either be commercial or residential uses that we want to separate these two spaces. Now, when you're separating spaces, there's a few things you want to think about. So one of them is the FRL, and that's the fire resistance level, and that's represented in 3 numbers. And that's to do with the structural adequacy, the structural integrity, or the integrity, and the insulative properties. So say you've got a wall that's rated at 60, 60, 60. That means for 60 minutes it needs to maintain all 3 of those aspects to meet the performance requirements of the NCC. So it's deemed to satisfy if you have use a system from a certain manufacturer. And often that's so. Say you've got a wall here separating 2 spaces, you've got a little person here, and we have a fire at this space. It gives this person the opportunity to either escape or get rescued within this time frame. That's why it's required, and that's why I'm really scared about reading about these places that have no, that are on an interim certificate, and they've got fire issues, fire safety issues. That type of stuff scares the hell out of me because it's a life safety issue. So we'll jump back here, and let's say for this circumstance, that's to do with fire. And the reason why I'm talking about fire is because it's closely related to acoustics. The density of a material can help you with acoustics as well. So another one is acoustics. So say you've got sound coming from the floor above. That's people walking around. You've got the noise generated by unit 1 coming through the space, by unit 2 coming through the space. You've got other ambient noises. You've got vibrations coming through the slab and going into the structure. So you've got a whole lot of noises that are happening. Now, let's say you're doing doing 2 spaces here between it. Okay, you want to separate these 2 spaces either for units or for commercial purposes. So we've got our fire issues and we have our sound issues that we want to deal with. So how could you do it? How could you do it? Now you could just whack up a concrete wall. That's one way to do it. So say if you have, back in the day, what they used to do with a lot of the public housing, that even, just pour a concrete wall, boom, even pour it in situ. So you've got concrete in here, a nice big solid chunk of concrete. But one of the problems with that is, say person at unit 2 bangs on that wall, really hard, bangs it bloody hard. you're going to get sound vibrating up, through, and into the other space. You'll feel it all the way through. Even if people do construction work at the top of a high-rise building, it can vibrate through the entire structure and get into your apartment or your unit or whatever you've got. So it can be a major issue. So what we need to look at is how to separate that. So to overcome that, if you're using a concrete wall, just to go on with that argument, either in situ or block, you cast that. You've got to deal with the potential sound issue between these two. You could probably put a little mastic in there, or an embedded complicated system, which you probably wouldn't do in Australia because no one would be bothered spending the money, or you'd run studs and things on the outside. But what we'll look at just a simple off-the-shelf, or some of the issues that would be surrounded with a simple off-the-shelf system. So say we've got these two guys. And what we'll do is we'll put a two studs here, and I'm drawing them a bit too big, but you can get the idea. Okay, with a little cavity in between them. Okay, and what I like to do, if they ever get around to doing it, is just putting a little slither of a mastic in between the stud and here. Okay, so when we're screwing it in, it's not going to cause that big of an issue. Okay, then what we do is we'll run our sheeting. So you're running your sheeting because up here, and you remember we've got our studs. Got our studs here going up. Okay, so you run your sheeting, multiple layers depending on what your requirements are, all the way up. You fill that in with some chalking, fire-rated chalking up there. You run it all the way up, and I'm just drawing that as a two-layer system. So we've got two layers of sheeting, maybe a gyprock or something here to provide our insulation, our sound insulation between the two spaces. Another thing to consider is the ceiling system. And what you want to do is, say you've got a suspended ceiling system. The advantage of doing it like this, okay, the advantage of doing it like this is that if there's an impact onto this system here, the air cap there is going to protect you from the sound traveling through to here. So, the sound, this sound coming from him isn't going to get all the way through because this air cavity will muffle it. This mastic separation there will hopefully dampen some of the sound going through there, as well as the caulking there as well. And same thing for this guy. Now, you can even get more advanced systems where they've got specially shaped studs and they're floating on inside. It can get quite complicated to achieve, really insane sound insulative properties. But it's all just to consider. This is a real simple approach. And another thing is, with your ceilings, you'd run your ceiling, at this level here, and that can either be, a suspended ceiling, it's floating here, and you hang it off the slab, same type of thing, depending on how you design it, but that's all separate. So that means the ceilings there, it's no problem. One of the issues that a lot of people would have, or you catch sometimes, is where they don't run the sheeting all the way up to provide that sound problem. They may just run a stud up to here, oh yeah, and we'll just stop that insulation, the sheeting at that point. That'll be fine, and we'll just run some insulation in here, and we'll put some insulation on there. That'll be great. That'll be no problem. Do the same thing here. And, that can work, but it's not as good as if you were to run, because you're running insulation on a ceiling and people will want to get access into it. By insulation, I mean the big fat bat stuff as well. Because what happens, if there is any issues here where someone needs to move a ceiling tile, wants to get into it, you're going to lose that integrity. That means this ceiling, which really you will occasionally want to get access to it, becomes part of the system in separating these two spaces. for acoustics. And we're not even talking about fire rating here, because you're still going to have to carry the system up all the way here. Often, the worry is, if they don't carry the system up, they don't carry the system all the way up and meet the fire requirements. And that's the challenge when you're going out on site. You may not see or be able to catch these type of things. That's where you want a clerk of works on site to try and capture it while it happens. So that is just an example of, and I'll jump back to here, of just some of the issues in just a real simple example, of separating two spaces in a typical apartment. Or not even an apartment, just an office building even just if you wanted to have a high quality office and you wanted to have a private room. The number of times I have had issues with just sound isolating a room for someone to have a meeting to get fired in, you'd be surprised how often the builders don't manage to do it or cut the corners. Because all of these extra little things here, that all costs extra money. But it can also be hidden and it's hard to see. So you need to get up into those spaces when you're doing your inspections to capture these things. And it can be hard when it's full of stuff. So that's one example that I thought, for some people not familiar with construction, just some of the issues that can be raised or that can appear with this. So the idea of wall to wall or wall to ceiling junctions can cause, is not surprising at all. Even just the caulking that they use, the density of it, or the products they use to fill in the gaps, that can cause problems too, because the sound can get through it. It's just really frustrating. And these tradies need to be switched on and know what they're doing. They're meant to be master craftsmen, but the problem is, if you're getting the hammer faster, 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 if the market is overheating, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen? It's tough. It's tough. So, and we'll go here back to the article. The remaining 10% came from metal-on-metal friction resulting from winds. Multiplex's managing director for Victoria, Graham Cottam, cast doubt on the findings in the 2017 report, saying they, Studco, obviously didn't send it to us for proofreading, but added the lessons from Prima Pearl have been incorporated into the Construction of Australia 108. Okay, so he wants the report proofread. Shouldn't they have independence? Shouldn't they have independence? Well, there you go. That just shows you. So noise from the tower in South Bank. So general noise, detailed noise. I'm just moving my computer over here because of the noise from it. Mr. Cotton said efforts were underway to investigate the cause of creaking noises in Australia 108, although the company would not be able to eradicate noise due to cases of extreme weather. We do expect creaking. It's just part and parcel of building, Mr. Cottam said. We won't fix the creaking and groaning in extreme weather conditions, or maybe you can't. He said Multiplex was investigating around 35 noise complaints from residents in the Australia 108 tower and was working to better understand the source. Sometimes noises can be generated by the vibration of elements within the building, she said. But she said sound levels under Australian standards for sleeping areas should not exceed 35 decibels. For residential units on a major road, the absolute maximum should be 40 decibels. Professor Ragjonopalan said it was not at all appropriate for residents to be exposed to noises at levels as loud as 70 decibels, especially during the night. And she said this could result in health problems for residents. Well, yeah, definitely it could, because of sleeping issues. It's very unhealthy for short-term and long-term. Short-term, it can cause lack of sleep, insomnia. Long-term, it can cause serious health conditions. Acoustic company PKA's principal consultant, Joel Perry-Jones, says respectively rectifying the noises like those concerning residents in Australia 108 could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and potentially involve relocation of residents to allow for major structural works. It's not an easy fix, Mr. Perry-Jones said. No, it is not an easy fix by any measure at all. Mr. Perry-Jones said creaking noises in high-rise towers can be quite intrusive for residents, as in extreme cases, the noises can be as loud as a gunshot. The steelwork might bend and bend and bend with small creaks that it gets to a critical limit, snaps back, and it will go bang in the middle of the night, waking everyone up and terrifying everyone as well. He said his company was receiving more and more calls from construction companies reporting issues with cracking or creaking noises in high-level residential towers. So the issues they're talking about here are even much more complicated than the example I was showing you there. You can see just how a simple little thing like that can, if you just don't put a bit of plaster in the right place, you can compromise an entire system and not achieve the outcome. So can you imagine if you don't fix your steel correctly, you don't tie it correctly, you fix it to the wrong thing, and then it can vibrate through the whole building. Then you've got to find it. You've got to hire these people to go and find it. That would be horrific to try and find it. So I think we need to get onto this because it's going to be the next fire facade issue. Oh boy. Oh boy. I hope not, mate. You're probably right. Mr. Perry Jones said there needs to be more collaboration in construction from the early stages of development. And the fact the buildings are getting taller make it worse, he said. We've had a few wind noise issues where the whole thing gets built, then they realize there's a wind noise. A resident from Australia wanted, you think they've tested it in a wind tunnel, the computer modeling? Oh, no, they wouldn't. A resident from Australia 108, who requested anonymity, said the creaking noises were not only heard in times of high wind, although she said they worsened with strong gusts. She said multiplex technicians had cut holes into her ceiling to investigate the source. They did it to be able to access the structural framework for components possibly causing friction noises, she said. The holes were cut last Wednesday. So this is just a recent development and a recent issue. Well, guys, what do you think? What do you reckon it could be? It's going to be our next fire cladding issue. Before we go, let's just listen. Let's just listen to that creaking noise again. And with that, I'll say goodbye. Like, share, subscribe, ding the bell to see my latest videos. I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.